Hello everybody, it's lovely to get to talk to you today. I want to tell you a little bit about my little girl who's 9 years old and how amazing it is to see the world through her eyes. Everything is an adventure. There's magic and wonder everywhere, and everybody's kind and loving. Even the baddies in her world aren't that bad. She said to me last week, "Mammy, you know, robbers don't want to hurt anybody. They just want to steal stuff so they can sell it and make money. They don't want any trouble." I looked at her and I smiled and I nodded, and I wished so hard that that was true. It's not the only time that I've wished the world was different for her. I wished it was different the most when her dad died when she was just 2 years old. I wished she didn't have to go through that pain. I wished I knew what to do to help her. I wished I knew what to say or do. But as a mother, I didn't have a clue. I was clueless. But I'm also a clinical psychologist. So I knew there are resources out there. There's research, there's literature, there's books. So I just leaned in to being a clinical psychologist, and I thought, I'll follow the books. That's all I can do. And the books were brilliant at first. They said use concrete language, no euphemisms, developmentally appropriate explanations, don't say gone to sleep, say dead, and they had lots of advice. And on the advice of the books, I took my daughter to the funeral home to see her dad in the coffin. And as we walked in, we bumped into the undertaker, and he stopped and looked at us and he said, "Thank goodness, I'm sick and tired of telling people to bring children here and involve them in the funeral. You're doing the right thing." I was never so relieved in my life. I was actually doing the right thing. The books were right. And I thought, you know what, this is not as hard. This is going to be okay. I'll just follow the books, and might even be easier than I thought it was going to be. But of course, it didn't turn out like that. The books pretty quickly ran their course. And too quickly, our type of death wasn't being represented in the children's books. I couldn't find children's books that talked about traumatic loss and suicide. And far too quickly, I got tired of looking at my little girl's slump in disappointment every time she got to a book on loss or bereavement, and she realised it had a happy ending or some happy resolution of some sort. That just wasn't her story. And more, I started to see her feel alone in her loss. So in desperation, I contacted some childhood bereavement experts. And they were lovely and they were really helpful, and they referred me to some books on suicide. And again, the books were fab, concrete, factual information, no euphemisms. And they were really good with the how and what of suicide. They were a little bit too good at times. For me, they were a little bit brutally factual. But they did what they were supposed to do. But what they didn't do was help me with the why. Now, I knew there was a why coming because as a clinical psychologist, I'd worked with lots of adolescents bereaved by suicide. And I knew that one day my little girl would look at me and say, "Mama, but if he loved me so much, why did he leave me?" And I didn't have an answer for that. So I went back to the childhood bereavement experts and I said to them, "Do you have an answer for this one?" And they said, "We do." And I said, "Brilliant." And they said, "You tell your daughter we can never know why." And I looked at them and I said, "Are you serious?" And they said, "Yes, we can never know why. That's the answer you give." And it just didn't feel right. It didn't sit well with me, and it felt like a kind of turning away from her pain, like a professional adult response. That sometimes it's so hard to look at a child's pain, we turn away and don't meet them where they're at. And I thought then, maybe it's just me, I'm her mother, I'm too close to it, I'm probably completely traumatised myself, I can't look at this professionally. Maybe I'm not the right person to be thinking about this at all. But then I came across some research conducted in Ireland by the National Suicide Research Foundation and an NGO called HUG. And they'd interviewed many people who were bereaved by suicide. And it turns out that most of those people were haunted by the why as well. They gave quotes from their participants, and their participants said things like, "The whys and what ifs are daily." and it weighs heavy on your heart and your health. Another participant said, the questions never stop. I keep asking myself, why did he do it? The other thing they said in the research was that people needed community resources, ways to talk about suicide that weren't professionalised or in specialist books on top shelves hidden away for people with issues. That we needed spaces and stories that normalised talking about suicide, that gave people stories and language to talk about it, not just the concrete facts. So I started to think we need both, and yes, of course we need the facts. No euphemisms. It has to be explained in a very concrete way. But the facts alone are not enough. We know that to heal trauma, we have to be able to story and put words to what happened to us. And we need stories to be able to do that. Our children are active, contextual, relational meaning makers, and so are we. And we make sense of new things by comparing and contrasting them to old things or stories about other people's experiences. So we can go, you know this thing that just happened? It's a bit like that thing that happened to your one down the road, or to that story that we heard, you know? And I didn't have a story like that to tell her, and I think we need more of them. Now, what kind of stories am I talking about? I'm talking about stories that say pain is stronger than love. Yes, I said that out loud. Sometimes pain is stronger than love, and it goes against our cultural stereotypes and all the stories we're told in romantic movies and books where love conquers all and it always wins the day. But pain can be so bad that it obliterates love. Pain can disconnect us from ourselves and our loved ones. And for a child, how do you explain that? Well, what about like an astronaut, and he's lost in space and he's had an accident? His radio's smashed up, his oxygen's low. The lower his oxygen goes, the more pain he's in. He loses his sense of gravity. He doesn't know if he's up or down. Home base have sent a ship to save him. People are sending messages of love in constantly, but he can't hear it because his radio is broken. And his hope is too small, and his pain is too big. Now, if I had a story like that, I could go to my little girl and say, you know, when your dad died, maybe he felt a bit like that. Maybe it was a bit like that astronaut. That astronaut loved his family and he tried so hard to hold on. But his hope was too small and his pain was too big. Now, some people, and especially the childhood bereavement experts, thought this is a bad idea. These stories are too dark, too hopeless for children. And there's this idea that if you tell a child a sad story, it will make them sad. The children are already sad. If we don't give them stories where they're seen and their experiences are represented, we leave them sad and alone. And I don't think that's okay. Now, Christopher Bailey, who's the art and health lead at the World Health Organization, captures this idea beautifully. He talks about the value of art, and he says, art makes visible what we are feeling, but we haven't been able to name just yet. And in doing so, enables us to see that we're not alone. Now, do I still wish the world was different for my little girl? Yeah, I do. I wish there were more stories with adversity. I wish she could find characters who lived a life and experience like hers. I wish she could find herself in a children's storybook. But most of all, I wish I could catch her by the hand, wrap her in a warm, cozy blanket, and put her on the sofa next to me and say, I see you. Our community sees you. You're not alone. Things like this happen. You're not the only person that this has happened to. And there's loads of stories out there about this happening to people. Now come here and let me tell you a story and show you that you're not alone. Thank you.